Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Leading Change. My name is Emma, and I've got Joe with me today, and we're going to be talking about Brogrammers. I got it right this time, and kind of development in a different mindset that a lot of people take. But before I get to all the questions that I've got for you, Joe, can you give everybody an introduction?
Yes, I'm Joe Emison, co-founder and CTO of Branch. We're a personal lines property and casualty carrier based in the US. And I'm a six-time technical founder. So this is my sixth time starting a company from scratch. And of the prior companies, all of them got to profitability and then were acquired by different companies. And then I moved on to the next thing.
Great. Well, thank you for joining me. Before we go too much further, I have to comment, I really like your sign that we can disagree and still love each other in the background. Just needed to put that out there. But so to start our discussion, I teased that we'll be talking about a different approach to building software. Obviously, 6 times going through this rodeo, you're well-versed to talk about this. But let's start with just kind of level setting of what are some of the biggest challenges that you see people go through when it comes to technology development and challenges that they might run into as they're trying to build a platform?
I think the biggest challenges that people run into stem from 2 main problems. One is that there's no continuing education in technology. And then 2, things change rapidly. And what this leads to is you have lots of different leadership and people working in technology who have very different understandings and very different beliefs on how to get things done. And in particular, what it means is your leadership often is operating with models that are 10, 20, 30 years old of how to build things that we have found much better things to do more recently. But leadership doesn't know what those things are.
Great. So then I want to get to this Brogrammers piece that I was just talking about, and so proud of myself for getting it right. People have heard me talk about sales bro mentality a lot, but this is obviously something that we see kind of coming into the development space, and specifically tied to that lack of continuing education, I think is a big part of it. So can you talk through what you've seen happen in terms of relying on or kind of management not knowing how to set these expectations, and how do we get past that trap of getting stuck in that?
Absolutely. So a lot of times what happens is there's management and leadership that hire the people who are going to do the work, right? Because a lot of times management and leadership is not involved in actually building the technology, writing software, et cetera. And so they'll hire people, and those people have skills that they don't have because continuing education, no continuing education, not understanding how things are going. And so those people are hired, and they're kind of like magicians, right? They can do something that nobody else can do. And a lot of times are fairly young, at least when they're starting in their careers. And so you get this paradigm where people get hired and they get told they're ninjas and they're rock stars. And that creates a certain amount of arrogance. And I was certainly in that role myself in my early to mid 20s, where, people would tell me how great I was and how special I was for these skills that I had in software development. And then I felt like, well, I could do any of the jobs in this company. I could sell, I could be in marketing, I'm just so much better than everyone because I have this thing that they can't do. And I can visualize myself doing all of the things they do. And this attitude then leads to this programmer view of, we're better than everyone because we have this skill, and we don't need to understand. We don't need to spend time understanding what the company needs to do or what the organizational goals are. We kind of understand those, but we're amazing. And so you get these very toxic environments in companies where there's a leadership that kind of doesn't understand how the technology department works. And so they think it's magic. And then even the technology leadership doesn't understand how the technology department actually gets stuff done. And so you have this very long distance in the org chart that goes down to the people actually building the tech in the organization, who think that they are amazing and wonderful and ninjas and rock stars. But really, they're quite distant from a lot of decisions that the organization might like to make better. And they're optimizing for not the organization. They're optimizing for like, I'm a ninja rock star who builds stuff, so I need to build the stuff that makes me more ninja rock star. And a lot of times that's building a lot of stuff that, you could buy much more cheaply. But you can, through all this magicness and programmerness, the organization ends up convincing itself, oh no, we need to build this because it's cool and special magic ninja rock star stuff.
I just want you to say Magic Ninja Rockstar like one more time. But but I think like we were talking about this, it's so true because they do have a skill set. And I talk a lot about this from the digital literacy perspective of how important it is for leadership to actually learn these things so that they can set realistic expectations. Because typically what I see is like either what you explained of like, you go do what you need to do to make the magic happen. And I'm over here and I'm just going to listen to whatever you say because I have no way of holding you accountable. And there's no expectation set. Or you have a leader who thinks the opposite and they think, well, this is just some lines of code and you should be able to take care of it. And they set unrealistic expectations that are never met. And so I often talk about this more from like that leadership perspective of how important that education and digital literacy is so that you can set and manage expectations. But the flip side, I've never had the magical development skills to know what kinds of challenges that causes.
What's even just to add to your second case too, a lot of times on the tech side, the management there ends up being, the metrics end up being defined by someone who doesn't understand the space. And so terrible choices are made for metrics. One great example of this is people having metrics on number of lines of code committed. And that will lead only to
even I know that's
outcomes.
a bad one.
I mean, to some extent, a better metric would be the number of lines of code removed while also writing features. That would be a much better way to do it. But there are great books. There's a great book called Accelerate, The Lean Science of DevOps. It's the best book written about software development. It is totally accessible to non-technical people, and it talks about what metrics you should optimize for. And gosh, if every non-technical and technical leader just read that book and understood it, that would solve a lot of the problems of just getting to a point of holding some accountability from the top down within technical organizations. But yeah, I agree with you. I really rarely see well-managed technical organizations. I either see these two cases of just, I don't know how to do it and it's magic, so I'm just going to let them get away with whatever, or we're going to make up our own metrics because we can't be bothered to understand the space better, and we're going to choose terrible metrics, and then everyone's going to get managed to nonsense.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned the idea of like, rather than letting people go down the path of like feeling like rock stars and magicians and be able to create whatever, even after some of that has already been created, and kind of taking the approach of maybe build versus buy. And when we were getting ready for this, I think just even like at an industry level, the insurance industry tends to opt towards building constantly, whether that's like on the business side where they're leveraging technology and they think it's going to give them a secret sauce, or from companies that are trying to develop something from the ground up and commercialize it, that they still feel like they have to build all of these pieces. So can you talk through kind of what does this like buy mentality gain for us as we move through trying to develop a solution?
Running a business is hard. And I think it's Steve Jobs who's credited with saying, what you're not doing is more important than even what you're doing, because being very precise with what you're going to put your effort and focus in and making that as small a number of things as possible really increases your chance of success dramatically. In my experience over founding 6 companies, most of the bad outcomes and decisions of my career have had to do with just not focusing on what mattered and focusing instead on things that didn't matter. And so if you are able to only build the things that differentiate you, the things that you have to build, and you buy everything else, then that will put a higher and higher percentage of your company's focus into the differentiation, into the thing that makes you special. And technologists and builders love to build stuff. And so the default view in any technical organization, generally speaking, is if we need it, we should build it because we build stuff and we take pride in building stuff and we like to name it, cute names, and we like to announce it. And I always get this sinking feeling in my stomach when I'm at like a company all hands meeting and a technical team is celebrated, or they announce that they've done something. And nobody else in the company can understand what the heck that thing is. There's like, we want to celebrate the technology team. They did a deployment of Kubernetes with Helm. And now we've got like a spin up time, a cold start time is down 25 seconds. Celebrating that at a company level from the technology team is just a complete disconnect from from anybody having any sense of common purpose or mission. And I can guarantee you none of your customers care about those things. And so, and you don't have to build that thing that I just talked about. You can buy that. It's not necessary to have a team of people doing that today. And so all of those things, if you can just do what differentiates you and you can manage to be honest about that, you will be better off. The best thing you can do is to say that thing we thought we had to build, that we thought wasn't out there, well, we found it out there. And instead of like lying to yourself and saying like, well, ours is going to be better and it's going to be more fit for purpose, and so we should just do ours. No, you should say we found something. It's like 80% what we have built or are going to build. Let's just try it. Even if we have to move off it, we'll have learned so much by using it that whatever we would build to replace it will be better, and we'll know we have to build if we have to leave it.
I'm laughing because we literally like internally on a Slack conversation earlier today had a tweet that was like poking fun at that exact all hands, where it's like anytime I hear the dev team like announcing, and they were saying, pulling out fake names of like Bullfrog and whatever else, right, versus Kubernetes. But I had a moment a couple of weeks ago where I was like, what does that mean? And I was in a meeting where it was actually appropriate for them to be using it. But like, to your point, anybody outside of a development team doesn't often know what those things mean. And so there is a benefit to pulling back and focusing on what is your true differentiator. And one thing that I would like to add to this conversation is, I think this is a great approach for like true software development and for teams that are looking to commercialize a product. But this is an even more important message for every carrier or agency or brokerage out there that's thinking that maybe they need to build their own platform versus going out and finding something. I promise, I think your differentiation comes from somewhere other than the technology that you're using. And you are better served by not having to worry about becoming a software development shop while also trying to figure out what that unique differentiator in the market is for yourself. And I've been preaching that for a while. And I think this takes it again one step further to tap into your experience and maybe just like recognize that we're all better collectively if we can collaborate versus trying to reinvent the wheel every time we're building a solution.
Yep. I think a good rule is if it's not customer facing, then and it doesn't lead to any customer facing difference, then the default should really be, we're trying to buy this thing. When it's customer facing, when it's brand, when it's customer experience, I think all of those things are really strong reasons that you should be building and building as much as possible. And I know there are lots of tech organizations who don't like to build front ends. It's not viewed as sort of like as hard, although it is very hard to make great front ends. But it's tend to, in the programmer world, like there's a macho aspect of like, we built a scalable back end, not like we built a really great to use, wonderful interface. And as a matter of fact, there's kind of programmers on the front end who are often like, I made it really fast. It was 10 milliseconds. I made it 1 millisecond. Nobody cares about that difference.
Nobody else even recognizes that.
no one saw that. But I think, having this deep care and culture around like we are investigating what it's like to use our systems, and we validate that and we want to celebrate in our all hands meetings, like, we did this thing and our customers were really happy and they said these things about how great the change was. Those are wonderful things to do. And you will run into things that you have to build. You will, right? It just won't be out there in the right way. At Branch, we started with Zendesk for customer support. It couldn't support text messaging the way we wanted. We moved to Front, and we had to build a bunch of stuff around it to make it work. But that whole experience really helped us understand what we needed in a way that if we had built our own, we'd still be mired in so much development and effort, and we would never be at the level of customer support that we have with Front. We were just actually recognized by Front as one of the top 100 companies in the world at customer support satisfaction by them. So,
congratulations.
So anyway.
Well, thank you so much for joining me for the conversation, Joe. And for anybody that's not, make sure that you connect with him on LinkedIn, follow him and Branch to stay up on all of what's going on, all of the beautiful awards. One other piece to plug that he did not mention is his own book. You gave a shout out to somebody else's, but Joe also has a book that I will include in the links for anybody to check out kind of on this exact topic. And certainly reach out if you've got any questions for either of us after the interview. But thank you again for joining me, Joe, and have a wonderful day, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Leading Change. If you liked what you saw, be sure to subscribe and come back weekly for more expert interviews on digital transformation, change management, and emerging technologies.